It wasn't the fancy displays or the weekend specials that caught his eye. It was a pair of hands, trembling slightly as they reached for a simple carton of milk. He watched as a woman, older, neatly dressed but with an air of profound weariness, checked the price tag. Then, with a quiet sigh that seemed to exhale years of unspoken worry, she placed it back on the cold shelf. Right there, under the stark fluorescent lights of Garrison's Groceries, Eleanor Vance was fighting back tears, and losing. A single drop escaped, tracing a path down her cheek before she quickly swiped it away, hoping no one had seen. But someone had seen. Across the aisle, 17-year-old Leo Martinez paused, his own short grocery list momentarily forgotten. He saw the wet track on her cheek, the resigned slump of her shoulders as she stared at the rows of food she apparently couldn't afford. He saw the quiet, painful calculation happening behind her eyes. He didn't know her, couldn't fathom the whirlwind that had recently upended her life, stripping away layers of security he couldn't even imagine. All he knew, with a sudden, sharp pang of recognition, was that this woman was hurting deeply and silently in the middle of aisle 5. A choice hung there, unspoken, seemingly small, yet poised to unravel a story of hidden struggles and astonishing connections neither could have ever predicted. Would he look away, like everyone else? Or would he? Leo wasn't the sort of kid who made waves. He preferred the steady currents, navigating the corridors of Northwood High and the familiar streets of his working-class neighborhood with a quiet diligence. He wasn't a loner, exactly, just focused. His energy, unlike many of his peers, wasn't spent chasing popularity or the latest phone. It was carefully rationed, invested where it counted most. Schoolwork was a priority. Good grades felt like one thing he could control. And then there was his part-time job, smelling of oil and tires, down at Mr. Henderson's garage. Every dollar earned was tracked, saved, earmarked, not for himself, but for the stack of bills that seemed to permanently reside on the small Formica table in their apartment kitchen. His mom, Sarah, was a rock, but even rocks were down. She worked grueling shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, often coming home bone-tired. The smell of antiseptic clinging to her scrubs, her smile strained but present for him and his younger sister, Maya. Leo saw the worry lines deepening around her eyes, felt the tension humming beneath the surface whenever the rent was due, or when Maya's asthma flared up again. Maya, 11 years old, with bright, curious eyes and lungs that often betrayed her, was the heart of their little world. Her wheezing cough in the night, the hiss and clatter of the old, second-hand nebulizer machine they relied on, the costly inhalers and doctor copays, they formed a constant, low-level thrum of anxiety in their lives. Sarah worried constantly about the aging nebulizer, whispering fears that it wasn't delivering the medication properly anymore. So Leo worked. He studied hard, hoping for scholarships he wasn't sure existed for kids like him. He made sure Maya took her meds, helped with homework when Sarah was working late, often started dinner. Simple meals, pasta again, maybe eggs, so his mom could just collapse for a few minutes when she got home. He was saving slowly, painstakingly, for that specific, quieter, more efficient nebulizer he'd researched online. It felt like a concrete goal, a tangible way to fight back against the worries that felt too large, too nebulous. His own desires, a used bike, new sneakers, were filed away under later. It wasn't about sacrifice, not really. It was just what you did for family. Love expressed through action, through responsibility quietly shouldered. His empathy was similarly quiet, manifesting in small deeds. Checking on old Mrs. Gable next door after a storm, discreetly sharing his sandwich with a kid at school he knew often went without. He didn't need thanks. The act itself was enough. That Tuesday afternoon felt ordinary. The familiar squeak of his cart's wobbly wheel, the drone of the store's overhead music, The mental math as he picked out the items on his mom's list. Milk, bread, eggs, the cheapest pasta brand. Keeping it under $20 if possible. He was comparing prices on canned tomatoes when he saw her properly for the first time. Eleanor, standing near the dairy case like a statue carved from worry. Her coat was simple, dark wool. Her shoes practical, but there was an undeniable fragility about her, a sense that she might crumble if bumped too hard. Her wire basket was heartbreakingly sparse. Just a small loaf of bread, a single yellow onion, and one can of generic tomato soup. Leo watched, pretending to examine soup labels himself, as she reached for the block of cheddar cheese, held it, her thumb tracing the price, then reluctantly placed it back. She did the same with a small carton of yogurt. Each movement was slow, deliberate, freighted with an invisible burden. Then she turned slightly, angling away from the main aisle, and brought the back of her hand up to her eye quickly, furtively. It wasn't loud sobbing, just that silent, awful leakage of grief or despair. She glanced around, her face pale beneath the harsh lights, her lips pressed tight as if holding back a dam. A knot formed in Leo's stomach. He'd seen that look before. Late at night, when his mom thought he and Maya were asleep, sitting at the kitchen table under the dim light, the bills spread out like a losing hand of cards. The look of someone desperately trying to maintain control when everything felt like it was slipping away. He quickly looked down at his own cart, embarrassed to be caught staring, not wanting to add to her humiliation. But the image was seared into his mind. He grabbed his pasta and headed toward the registers, his own modest purchases suddenly feeling like an extravagant feast compared to her near-empty basket. And then, inevitably, she was there again, in the queue, just ahead of him. Eleanor. Her hands visibly trembled as she placed the bread, the onion, the lone can of soup onto the black conveyor belt. The cashier, a girl named Chloe whom Leo vaguely knew from school, scanned the items with practiced indifference. $9.47, Chloe announced, already looking past Eleanor to the next customer. Eleanor opened her purse, a slightly worn class-style leather bag. Leo saw her fumble inside, her knuckles white. She pulled out a small collection of coins and a few crumpled dollar bills. Slowly, painstakingly, she counted them onto the counter. 1, 2, 3, $4, then quarters, dimes, nickels, piling them into small, neat stacks. Her movements became jerky, a flicker of panic in her eyes as the total remained stubbornly out of reach. She recounted, her breath catching, her face flushed a painful, blotchy red. She started to gather the coins back into her palm, her voice a mortified whisper. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I must have miscalculated. Perhaps I should put the soup back." Chloe let out an audible sigh, a small puff of teenage impatience. Behind Leo, someone cleared their throat. The air thickened with discomfort. Eleanor looked down at her hands, her shoulders slumping, her entire posture radiating defeat and shame. In that instant, something clicked inside Leo. All the careful budgeting, the image of the new nebulizer, the ingrained habit of keeping his head down, his own family's struggles. It all momentarily receded. What surged forward was a raw, undeniable wave of empathy. He thought of his mom's tired face, Maya's whistling breaths, the quiet dignity they fought so hard to maintain. He knew this feeling. Maybe not this exact public humiliation, but the cold dread of scarcity, the shame of not having enough. His heart started hammering against his ribs. His palms felt clammy. Speaking up felt like breaking a lifelong rule of invisibility. He had $53 in his wallet, cash from 2 long shifts at the garage, money specifically set aside, added to the nebulizer fund just that morning. Giving it away meant pushing that goal back significantly. It meant another month, maybe 2, of the old, rattling machine. It meant explaining to his mom, But Eleanor's downcast eyes, the way her hand shook as she reached for the can of soup to return it, it tipped the scale. He took a shallow, unsteady breath. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat, louder this time. "Excuse me, I can cover this." Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes wide and startled, red-rimmed and swimming with confusion. "Oh, no! Goodness, no! I couldn't allow—" She stammered, her hand fluttering nervously near her collar. Chloe paused, her hand hovering over the void button, looking from Eleanor to Leo with newfound interest. "It's okay," Leo insisted, pulling out his worn wallet. He felt his own face flush now, but pushed past embarrassment. He avoided Eleanor's intense gaze, focusing on extracting the $50 bill, the specific 50 he'd mentally allocated. He held it out to Chloe. "Please, just take it out of this." Chloe took the bill, her expression shifting to surprise. Okay." "No, really, young man, I simply can't accept." Eleanor protested again, her voice thick with unshed tears. "It's all right," Leo mumbled, looking down as Chloe processed the transaction. "Honestly, it's fine." He just wanted the moment to pass, for the invisible spotlight to dim. Chloe counted out the change, a thick wad of tens, fives, ones, and coins, and handed it back to Leo along with the receipt. He stuffed it into his pocket, without looking. Then, awkwardly, he began placing Eleanor's few items into one of the store's thin plastic bags. The bread, the onion, the soup, it barely filled the bottom. Eleanor just stood there, watching him, the tears finally overflowing, streaming silently down her face now. But these felt different from the desperate terror he'd glimpsed earlier. These were tears of shock, a profound relief, maybe even disbelief. The flush of shame was replaced by a raw, open vulnerability. "Thank you," she whispered, the words barely audible over the checkout beeps and the store's low hum. "Just thank you." "You're welcome," Leo replied, finally managing to meet her eyes for a brief second. He saw gratitude, yes, but also a deep, pervasive sadness that seemed much larger than the cost of a few groceries. He held out the bag. "Here you are." She took it, her cold fingers brushing against his for just a moment. I truly don't know how to thank you properly." "No need," Leo said softly. A beat of awkward silence stretched between them, a small island of stillness in the bustling store. He felt a surprising, quiet pull, an urge to do more than just hand over the bag and walk away. "Do you, need a hand carrying this outside?" he asked, feeling his shyness return. Eleanor looked down at the light, single bag, then back up at Leo, her gaze searching his young, earnest face. A small, watery, yet genuine smile touched her lips. "That's extraordinarily kind of you." "Yes, thank you, I'd appreciate that." Together, they walked through the sliding doors, emerging into the gray, cool air of the late afternoon. The parking lot buzzed with activity. Engines starting, car doors slamming, people rushing. Away from the judgment, real or perceived, of the checkout line, Eleanor seemed to inhale more deeply, though the sadness hadn't lifted entirely. It clung to her like a damp chill. They walked slowly toward the edge of the lot, where the sidewalk led to the bus stop on the main road. As they walked, she began to speak, her voice hesitant at first, low and tinged with weariness. "Things have just been rather overwhelming lately," she murmured, not looking at him directly. "My husband, Arthur, he passed away suddenly a few months back." "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that," Leo said sincerely, matching his pace to hers. She nodded, swallowing visibly. "Thank you. It was the shock and the aftermath." She paused, shaking her head slightly as if trying to dislodge a painful memory. "Well, it turns out there were significant debts. business dealings I was unaware of, legal complications with this state, lawyers, courts. Has become a tangled mess. She took another shaky breath. My personal accounts were frozen, unexpectedly. My pension, it suddenly has to cover everything, and it simply doesn't stretch. Not even close. Leo listened quietly, offering no empty platitudes, just the steady presence of someone walking alongside her. His silence seemed to create a safe space. I have children, she continued, her voice gaining a slight edge of resolve, perhaps fueled by the simple relief of sharing the burden aloud. Grown children with their own families, their own pressures. I haven't wanted to alarm them, not until I understand the full extent of this situation myself. They believe I'm managing all right. A small, humorless sound escaped her, closer to a sigh than a laugh. Managing. Today was particularly difficult. I checked my balance this morning, and it was even less than I anticipated. I simply miscalculated when I came in here. They reached the covered bench at the bus stop. She turned to face him fully, the grocery bag held loosely in her hand. I have never, she said, her voice low but intense, never in my life felt so adrift, so powerless. Her eyes, clearer now but still shadowed, searched his. Why did you step in, young man? Why did you help a complete stranger? Leo shifted his weight, feeling the heat rise in his face again. I don't really know, he admitted truthfully. You looked like you needed someone to. My mom, she works really hard, but sometimes things get tight for us, too. I guess I just saw something I recognized. A flicker of understanding crossed Eleanor's features. She took in his slightly worn jacket, the careful way he held himself, the lack of artifice in his gaze. She saw not just a kind teenager, but perhaps a reflection of struggle met with quiet resilience. You have a good heart, Leo, she said softly. Your mother has clearly raised a fine young man. Leo felt a warmth spread through his chest at the mention of his mom. She does her best, he mumbled. He found himself telling her, briefly, about his mom being a nurse, the long hours, about Maya and her troublesome asthma. He didn't overshare, just offer a small window into his own world, balancing the exchange. It felt surprisingly natural, talking to this woman whose tears had moved him just moments before. The distant rumble of an approaching engine grew louder. Ah, that will be my bus, Eleanor said, straightening her shoulders, gathering a measure of composure. She clutched the bag a little tighter. Leo. Did you say your name was Leo? Yes, ma'am. Leo Martinez. Thank you again, Leo Martinez, she said, her voice steadier now, infused with quiet dignity that seemed to reassert itself. What you did today, it was more than just groceries. You offered a moment of grace. Thank you. Take care, Mrs. He trailed off, realizing he didn't know her name. Eleanor, she supplied with another small, fleeting smile. Just Eleanor is fine. She turned and stepped carefully onto the arriving bus. Leo watched the bus merge into traffic and disappear around the corner, taking Eleanor and her meager groceries away. He stood there for a moment longer, the $40-odd remaining from his $50 feeling heavy in his pocket, yet strangely lighter than before. The nebulizer fund was depleted back to almost zero. He'd have to work extra shifts, maybe ask Mr. Henderson for more hours. He sighed. It was okay. More than okay. Somehow, walking home to the fading light, he felt an unexpected sense of clarity, a quiet satisfaction that outweighed the setback to his savings goal. Life settled back into its familiar pattern. School homework, the scent of oil and exhaust at Henderson's garage. Leo diligently changed oil filters, rotated tires, listened to Mr. Henderson reminisce about carburetors, and started putting dollars back into the empty nebulizer envelope taped inside his textbook. He thought of Eleanor sometimes, a fleeting image of her tear-streaked face or her quiet dignity at the bus stop. He hoped she was okay, hoped things had somehow untangled for her. He never expected their paths to cross again. Their encounter felt like a single, poignant note played in the symphony of city life, resonant but finished. Until Friday afternoon. Leo was just tightening the lug nuts on Mrs. Gable's ancient Buick when a vehicle pulled into the garage lot that silenced Mr. Henderson mid-sentence. It wasn't a sputtering pickup or a minivan shedding rust. It was a gleaming, dark silver luxury sedan, the kind that whispered money and belonged downtown, not parked between a stack of bald tires and an overflowing oil drum. The driver's door opened with a hushed click, and a woman emerged. Tall, elegant, her silver hair swept back impeccably, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray pantsuit. She moved with understated authority, her eyes scanning the cluttered garage until they landed squarely on Leo. Leo froze, wrench still in hand, grease smudged on his cheek. It was Eleanor, but transformed. The fragile, haunted look was gone. The lines of worry seemed smoothed away, replaced by a calm, composed strength. She looked powerful, restored, completely different. "Mr. Henderson?" she inquired, her voice modulated and clear, though her gaze remained fixed on Leo. Mr. Henderson, looking flustered, wiped his greasy hands on a red rag. "That'd be me. Something I can help you with, ma'am?" "Yes," Eleanor said, walking toward them, her low heels making soft clicking sounds on the stained concrete. "I believe you employ a young man named Leo Martinez. I was hoping to find him here." Mr. Henderson shot a bewildered glance at Leo, who was still processing the sheer cognitive dissonance of seeing this woman in this place. Yeah, right here. This is Leo." Eleanor stopped a few feet from Leo, and a warm, almost relieved smile spread across her face, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Leo, I am so glad I found you. I inquired at the grocery store, and they mentioned a young man who sometimes helps out here." Leo swallowed, tried to find his voice, wiping his hands instinctively on his already dirty jeans. "Eleanor? Hi. Is everything all right?" A flicker of worry surfaced. Had things gotten worse for her? "Everything," she said, her smile deepening, reaching her eyes with genuine warmth, "is beginning to be all right, and I have you in large part to thank for that." Mr. Henderson gaped, looking back and forth between the elegantly dressed woman and his grease-covered teenage employee. Eleanor noticed his confusion. "Mr. Henderson, forgive my intrusion, but might I have a few minutes alone with Leo? It concerns a rather important personal matter." Oh, sure, absolutely. "No problem at all," Mr. Henderson stammered, quickly retreating toward the relative sanctuary of his cluttered office cubicle, pulling the greasy door partly closed. Eleanor turned her full attention back to Leo, her expression softening. "First," she said, her tone becoming gently serious, "please allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Eleanor Vance." The name hovered in the air. Vance. It tickled a memory, something from the local news, but he couldn't quite place it. "My late husband," Eleanor continued softly, watching his face, "was Arthur Vance." That name detonated in Leo's mind. Arthur Vance. Vance Technologies, the massive tech giant whose gleaming headquarters dominated the city skyline. The Vance Foundation, a legendary philanthropic organization whose name was synonymous with huge donations to hospitals, universities, the arts, homeless shelters, everything. Arthur Vance had been a titan, a local legend, a billionaire who had passed away earlier that year, his death extensively covered by the media. Leo stared at her, his brain struggling to overlay the image of the weeping woman counting coins for soup onto this figure. Eleanor Vance, widow of one of the most powerful and respected men in the entire region. It didn't compute. Eleanor saw the shock and disbelief warring on his face and gave a quiet sigh. It's a rather complicated situation, Leo. When Arthur passed, it wasn't just grief I inherited. There were unforeseen legal challenges, contentious claims against the estate from entities I never knew existed, aggressive creditors, actions that resulted in a temporary, almost complete freeze on assets while the lawyers battled it out. It sounds utterly implausible, I know, given Arthur's public profile, but for several weeks I was caught in a perfect storm of bureaucracy and legal maneuvering. The personal accounts I could readily access dwindled to practically nothing. She looked away for a brief moment, a flicker of the remembered stress crossing her features. I didn't want to burden my children with the details until I had clarity myself. They have their own lives. And honestly, using the Vance name to ask for help felt wrong somehow when I couldn't afford basic necessities. Pride is a foolish thing sometimes. Arthur and I, especially in recent years, always valued discretion, try to live without excessive ostentation. The fortune, it was always intended primarily for the foundation's work. Her gaze returned to Leo, steady and direct. The day we met in Garrison's Groceries, that was a nadir, the absolute lowest point. A crucial legal ruling had gone against us that morning. My main accessible account was unexpectedly blocked due to a creditor's lien, and I genuinely didn't know how I'd manage the next few days. I felt utterly isolated, ashamed, and frankly invisible. Leo was rendered speechless, the wrench feeling heavy and useless in his hand. The woman whose dignity he'd tried to preserve, whose small need he'd met with his carefully saved nebulizer money, was Eleanor Vance. The scale of the hidden reality behind her momentary poverty was staggering. Yesterday afternoon, Eleanor continued, a clear note of profound relief entering her voice. The primary legal entanglement was finally resolved in our favor. The estate is being properly settled. The holds have been lifted. Things are returning to normal, at least financially. She paused and her expression shifted, softening into one of deep, unwavering gratitude. But returning to normal wouldn't feel right without acknowledging what transpired, without finding the young man who showed such decency. Eleanor Vance looked at Leo, really looked at him, standing there in his oil-stained work clothes, his face smudged, but his eyes clear and honest. "Leo," she began again, her voice gaining a slight tremor, thick with an emotion that went far beyond simple thankfulness. "When you saw me in that store, I felt utterly broken, not just because I lacked money, but because I felt stripped of my dignity. The world seemed harsh, uncaring. I felt less than human in that moment." She took another small step closer, closing the distance between them slightly. "And then you stepped forward, a teenager, clearly mindful of your own budget. I saw you checking prices too, yet you offered help to a distraught stranger without a flicker of condescension, without asking a single question. You didn't make me feel judged. You simply eased a burden." A tear escaped, tracing a familiar path down her cheek, but this tear shone with gratitude, not despair. "Your kindness, Leo," it was like a sudden beam of light in suffocating darkness. It wasn't just about the $50, though believe me, in that moment it felt like a lifeline. It was the humanity of your gesture. It reminded me so strongly of Arthur, of why he poured his heart and soul into building the foundation. He always believed that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in compassion, in our capacity to connect with and lift one another. Leo felt completely out of his depth, overwhelmed by the intensity of her words and the situation's surreal nature. I just did what anyone would do," he stammered, feeling inadequate. "No, Leo," Eleanor corrected him gently but firmly, her gaze unwavering. "That is simply not true. Many people would have looked away. Many would have felt awkward and pretended not to notice. Many are too caught up in their own concerns. You saw me, and you chose to act. That choice speaks volumes about your character. She took a steadying breath. As soon as the financial situation stabilized, my very first priority was to find you. To repay you, of course. But just handing you back the cash felt insufficient. Profoundly so. Your act wasn't a loan, it was a moment of grace. It deserves more than repayment. It deserves recognition. It deserves investment. Leo frowned, the word hanging strangely in the air of the garage. Investment. Precisely, Eleanor affirmed. I am now the chairwoman of the Vance Foundation. Arthur entrusted me with continuing his life's work. And that work is fundamentally about identifying and nurturing potential, supporting individuals who demonstrate integrity and a commitment to making the world slightly better, and providing opportunities where they can flourish. Leo, your inherent empathy, your quiet integrity, that is potential. That is the goodness the Foundation seeks to foster. Her expression grew more focused. After learning your name from the very helpful cashier at Garrison's, who remembered your kindness, I took the liberty of making some discreet inquiries. I learned about your mother, Sarah, and her demanding work as a nurse. I learned about your bright sister, Maya, and her ongoing battle with asthma. I learned about your strong academic record, achieved while juggling significant responsibilities at home and here. Leo's eyes widened in surprise. She knew about Maya? About his mom? The Vance Foundation, Eleanor continued, her voice filled with calm purpose, has several scholarship programs designed for students like you, students who exhibit not only academic promise, but, more importantly, exceptional character and a demonstrated capacity for compassion. Leo, on behalf of the Foundation's board, I would be honored to offer you a full undergraduate scholarship. Full tuition, fees, books, and a stipend for living expenses to attend the college or university of your choice upon graduation. The ground seemed to tilt beneath Leo's feet. A full scholarship? College paid for? The immense weight of future debt, a burden he carried silently for years, suddenly vanished. He felt a prickling behind his eyes, a tightness in his throat. And there's more, Eleanor said softly, her gaze kind. The Foundation is actively involved in numerous community health initiatives. We currently have an opening for an administrative coordinator in that department, a role that requires strong organizational skills, empathy, and the ability to liaise effectively between medical providers, community partners, and the families we serve. Knowing your mother's extensive experience as a nurse, her dedication, her inherent compassion, it struck me as a potentially wonderful fit. The position offers standard business hours, considerably less physical stress than floor nursing, and a salary that will provide significantly more stability for your family. Would your mother, perhaps, be open to learning more about this opportunity? Leo struggled to breathe, let alone speak. A future for him? A better, less stressful, better-paying job for his mom? It was too much, too sudden, too wonderful. Finally, Eleanor added, her voice gentle, Arthur was particularly passionate about supporting families dealing with chronic childhood illnesses. The Foundation has specific, dedicated funds for precisely this purpose. We would be privileged to ensure that Maya receives comprehensive, top-tier asthma care, including any and all necessary medical equipment, specialist consultations and medications fully covered. No more anxieties about the cost of inhalers, or whether her current nebulizer is adequate. She paused, her eyes locking with his. Perhaps a new, high-quality nebulizer would be a good start. The mention of a nebulizer, the very thing he had sacrificed his savings for, the tangible symbol of his family's struggle and his own quiet effort, broke through Leo's stunned silence. A choked sob escaped him, followed by tears he couldn't stop. Tears not of sadness or pity, but of overwhelming relief, disbelief, and a gratitude so immense it felt physically painful. Eleanor stepped forward and placed a comforting hand on his grease-stained arm. Leo, she said, her own eyes glistening now, please understand, this isn't charity. This is reciprocity. This is a foundation fulfilling its mission. You reminded me, at a moment when I felt profoundly disconnected, of the power of simple human kindness. You embodied the very principles Arthur built his legacy upon. You didn't help me because you expected a reward. You helped because it was the right thing to do. And that character, that empathy, that is what earns this opportunity. From the doorway of the office, Mr. Henderson let out a long, low whistle of astonishment. Through his tears, Leo managed a shaky, watery laugh, finally finding his voice, however choked. I don't know what to say, Mrs. Vance. Thank you. Just thank you. Eleanor, please, she insisted warmly, her hand still resting gently on his arm. And truly, Leo, the thanks belong to you. You helped me remember what truly matters. In the ordinary, grease-scented air of Henderson's garage, an extraordinary exchange had unfolded, charged with the unexpected. Life-altering power of kindness returned manifold. The weeks and months that followed felt like waking from a long, anxious dream. The changes were profound, yet they unfolded with a sense of rightness, of disparate pieces finally aligning. Leo, free from the crushing weight of future college debt, attacked his senior year with a newfound focus and excitement. He dove into researching engineering programs, a path that had previously felt like an unattainable fantasy. The quiet hum of financial worry that had been the background noise of his life was replaced by the brighter frequency of hope and opportunity. Sarah Martinez met with Eleanor Vance the following week. Initially hesitant, almost disbelieving, Sarah found immediate rapport with the composed, empathetic woman who saw not just her nursing credentials, but her years of quiet strength and dedication. The administrative role at the Vance Foundation was, as Eleanor had suggested, a perfect fit. The regular hours transformed their family life. Sarah was home for dinner most nights, less physically exhausted, more emotionally present. The shadows of fatigue around her eyes began to recede, replaced by a steady, calm light. Their small apartment seemed to exhale a collective sigh of relief. Through the foundation, Maya received her new nebulizer, sleek, quiet, and efficient, along with access to a leading pediatric pulmonologist. With optimized treatment and regular care, her asthma attacks became less frequent, less severe. The constant parental vigilance eased, allowing Maya's natural childhood exuberance to bubble closer to the surface. The rattling sound of the old machine was replaced by the quieter rhythm of healthier breathing. But the story didn't end there. The connection forged in that grocery store aisle and solidified in the garage didn't dissolve once the immediate needs were met. It evolved into a quiet, unlikely, but deeply genuine friendship. Eleanor became a source of guidance for Leo as he navigated college applications, sharing insights not just about academics, but about life, about purpose, occasionally sharing poignant stories of Arthur's own journey and his unwavering belief in using success to create opportunities for others. Leo, in turn, offered Eleanor something perhaps just as valuable, a grounding connection to the everyday world, a reminder of the simple, powerful impact of individual empathy beyond the grand scale of foundation work. He began volunteering at some foundation events, witnessing firsthand the vast network of support her family had created, feeling a sense of shared purpose. Now and then, they'd meet for coffee, the elegant chairwoman and the earnest young man soon heading off to college, two people from vastly different spheres, forever linked by an unexpected moment of shared humanity. Their story became a quiet touchstone within the Vance Foundation, an internal reminder of its core mission, not just writing checks, but recognizing and investing in human character, understanding that kindness is a currency all its own, and witnessing how one small, uncalculated act of seeing another person's struggle can unlock unforeseen futures and forge bonds that transcend circumstance. Leo never forgot the $50 bill the moment of hesitation, the quiet sacrifice of his savings. He carried a memory not as a reminder of what he gave, but of what he gained. The profound understanding that everyone carries hidden burdens, that empathy requires a conscious choice to look beyond the surface, and that the most valuable connections often bloom in the most unexpected soil. He learned that day in the grocery store, and in the days that followed, that a single act of seeing someone, truly seeing them, can ripple outwards, changing lives, including your own, in ways you could never possibly fathom. The world, he now knew with certainty, was intricately woven with threads of kindness, waiting for moments of connection to illuminate its beautiful, resilient pattern.